Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. First of all, I would like to say sorry because I have delayed this video because of some personal travel commitments. I couldn't upload this video last week, but it's never too late and I'm here today. This will be episode 3 of Gitops and Argo CD. In the last two videos, we learned about Argo CD and Gitops in detail. What is Gitops? What are the principles of Gitops? How the design of Argo CD. We also talked about how Argo CD fits into the whole GitOps ecosystem and why is it one of the most popular tools. And this video is going to be a deep dive of Argo CD. And in this video, we will try to understand how to use Argo CD. So this will be more of hands-on video where I'll show you right from installation. We'll deploy a sample application onto a Kubernetes cluster, and I'll tell you all the steps. Many people are facing issues with using the Argo CD UI. So we'll also talk about the Argo CD CLI, how to use Argo CD from the UI as well as CLI. And in the previous classes, we discussed about the architecture, right? So while we do the hands-on, I'll also talk more about, okay, what each component is doing, and probably you might get more idea. And finally, I'll also show you different ways of using Argo CD, like inside your Git repository, using plain Kubernetes manifest, or using Helm charts, using customize, different ways of using Argo CD. So again, it's going to be an end-to-end hands-on video. If you haven't tried Argo CD before, then this is the best place to start. Without any delay, I will quickly start the video. So let's get to the other screen where I'll do the screen sharing of my terminal and proceed with the video. Okay, so now we have the screen sharing enabled, and for the purpose of video, I just have my Kubernetes cluster set up. It's a very basic Minikube Kubernetes cluster. All that I'll show you at Minikube status. The Minikube cluster is up and running. I just use the default Docker driver. I haven't even made any changes to the configuration. Now, the first thing that you have to do is go to the Argo CD docs. Okay. So for that, what I'll do is just say Argo CD followed by docs. So this is the Argo CD documentation. And here you have lot of options. Argo CD documentation is very detailed. You have technically everything to learn Argo CD through the documentation. But the best way to start is using this getting started. Just click on the getting started and you have an option for installing Argo CD. In one of our previous classes, I told you you can install Argo CD using plain manifest. You can install Argo CD using Helm charts, and you can also install Argo CD using an operator. So firstly, let's start with installing Argo CD using plain manifest, because that's one of the easiest ways of doing the installation of Argo CD. But after that, I'll also show you how to install it using Helm charts and the operator as well. So just simply copy this one. And what this command will do is it will create a namespace called Argo CD. And whenever you are creating any Kubernetes controllers, it is suggested that create those Kubernetes controllers in a personalized namespace. For example, you are installing Istio, go for a namespace called Istio or whatever you would like to, or you're installing any other Kubernetes controller. It's preferred to keep the installations in different namespaces so that you can watch for that namespaces for any specific issues, or you have everything under a single namespace. I mean, everything in different namespaces. Like you don't mess up with Istio controller, Argo CD controller, and all the other controllers in a single namespace. Okay. So this first command, kubectl create namespace Argo CD, it will create that namespace, and then you are installing bunch of manifests. Now, what are these manifests? You can just take this URL, go back to your browser, and just put that URL on your browser, and you'll notice that these are all the manifests. Like there are bunch of manifests. You can keep scrolling and you'll keep noticing the manifests. On a high level, they are the Argo CD control plane components, and also the Argo CD API server. You have Argo CD custom resource definitions, you have services, you have pods, you have lot of things, and also network policies. So all of them will be installed using this one single manifest that you get from the Argo CD documentation. Now, as soon as I click on the enter, you will see the installations. Okay, it says that the namespace Argo CD already exists, probably because of the demo that I was doing before this video. Now you can see that all of these things are created. Like you can wait for a minute here, pause the video here, and you can or if you're trying the practicals, you can also take a look at what are the things that are getting installed. So you notice that there are custom resource definitions, service accounts, roles, role bindings, config maps, secrets, deployments. So Argo CD has so many workloads and so many components, right? So that's one of the reasons why I explained the Argo CD architecture in detail, because when you start using Argo CD, you don't get confused. Okay, what is this component doing? What exactly is this component doing? So if you haven't watched that previous videos, I will highly recommend you to watch that previous videos. Everything is in the Gitops playlist. I'll put the link of the Gitops playlist in the description. Okay. Now, once this is installed, okay, just wait for all the pods to come up. How do you do that? Just say kubectl get pods minus n argo cd, because that's the namespace where we installed, minus w to just watch the pods. Now this is done, but just keep a note that it might depend from your laptop to laptop, configuration to configuration, the Kubernetes cluster to cluster, the amount of time these pods will take to come up. So please be patient here. If in case if it is taking more time in your case, then yeah, just see the minus w command. Just use the minus w command and wait for it, where you watch for the pods to come up. Ideally, it shouldn't take more than 2 to 3 minutes, but sometimes if you try to do this on a AWS EC2 instance with low spec, then you might need more time. Okay. So the pods are installed, and these are the pods which we also discussed in the Argo CD architecture, where you have application controller, you have, okay, let's go one by one. The first thing is you have the server component, which is basically the API server of Argo CD, the one that we would interact with Argo CD for the UI and CLI communication, right? So just like Kubernetes has an API server, Argo CD has a server which takes all the requests from the users. If you are doing Argo CD some command line command, then the request will go to this server component. Again, let's say you are using the UI as well, then you interact with this server component. Then you have the repo server. Repo server is basically for interacting with the version control system that you are using to store your manifests. So by principle, Gitops can use any version control system, but Argo CD only supports Git based version control systems. That means you can use either GitHub, Bitbucket, or any other Git based solutions. Then Redis is keeping for keeping state, for caching, all of these things. Then you have notifications controller. Just ignore this for a while. This is just introduced, I think, from the Argo CD version 2.5. Before that, if you are installing a lower version of Argo CD, you will not notice the notifications controller. It was merged after 2.5 or 2.6. Then you have Argo CD Dex server. Dex is basically for the SSO part of it. If you want to set up OIDC, or if you want to set up any OAuth related configurations with your existing identity providers, then you can use Dex. Application sets, I'll come to it probably in the next video, or I don't know if I'll cover application sets, but if it is required, then put that in the comment section. I'll make a video. It's basically a way of generating the applications. So what are applications? So Argo CD listens to a custom resource called applications to perform the actions. I mean, we'll talk about applications as we go into the video. When we do the practicals, you'll understand what an application is in terms of Argo CD. Okay, so it's not the application or the microservice that you are deploying, but Argo CD has a custom resource called application, which Argo CD listens to and performs specific action. So I'll show you when we do that using the CLI or the UI, you will notice that. So application sets controller is a way of generating these applications. Let's say you have multiple Kubernetes clusters. Writing these applications again and again is not that easy. So you use different kinds of generators in the application set to generate this application. So it can be cluster based generators or metrics based generators. So I'll talk about that. Probably it might confuse the beginner. So I don't want to deep dive application sets at this point of time. Then you have the application controller, which is the core of Argo CD, which is doing the core reconciliation logic. Like I told, by principle, GitOps has to keep a state between your version control system and your Kubernetes cluster, right? So application controller is the one that keeps that state and reports you if there is some out of sync, or if there is any issue with your application syncing. So now let's proceed and see what is the services that are created. Now, why you need services? because sorry, minus n Argo CD. So I want to interact with the Argo CD UI. So firstly, I'll show you how to log into the Argo CD UI, create an application, and deploy some Kubernetes deployments or services. Later, I'll show you how to interact with the CLI. So for that, there is this service component called Argo CD server. Like I told you, this is responsible for interacting using the UI or the CLI. So what I'll do is kubectl edit svc, the name of the service, minus n Argo CD. Now, why I'm doing this is by default, this service comes in a cluster IP mode. And what I want to do is I want to change this cluster IP mode to node port mode so that I can access this specific service from my browser. Perfect. Now I have exposed the service. And what I need to do is I need to create, like this is created in node port mode. Now I can access the service from this terminal because it can have access to the minikube cluster. But if I want to access it through the browser, I have to do some kind of port forwarding, right? Or I need to create a tunnel. So there is a very simple way of doing it using minikube. All that you need to do is just say minikube service followed by list, minikube service list, minus n Argo CD. Again, this is very specific to minikube. If you're using a different Kubernetes cluster, look at the implementation of the tunnel or how do you create a tunnel on that specific thing. Or if you are already on a cloud provider, you can also expose the Argo CD server as a load balancer type. So you don't have to do any of these things. Okay, now what you'll notice is this is the Argo CD server component, right? So I can simply say minikube service Argo CD server minus n Argo CD, and what minikube will do is it will create a tunnel and it will provide you an IP address. Like this is the IP address that minikube has provided me. So this is for HTTP access and this is for the HTTPS access. So whatever you would like to, like if I want to use Argo CD through HTTP, I can use this. If I want to use Argo CD through HTTPS, I can use this. So let me take one of these, and what I need to do is just paste it on the browser, move to advanced because you are using an insecure way of accessing Argo CD, and that's it. You get the Argo CD UI page. Now by default, like what happened here is that although we created the Dex component, so like I told you, when you are installing Argo CD, it creates all of these things. Like the Dex component is already there, but we have not integrated any SSO solutions or OIDC, OAuth, or we haven't integrated our LDAP identity provider to the Argo CD. So that's why you don't see any SSO configuration, or you don't have an option, for example, login with Facebook, login with Google. So you don't see any of these things because you have not integrated the Dex configuration. So if you want to do login with any specific thing, then you can use that specific. Like for example, you can go back to the Argo CD documentation and just search for Dex, and you have a very clear documentation of how to use Dex with your existing identity provider. Does not matter what you're using, so you can just follow this documentation. But again, it becomes too advanced. In this specific class, I will show you how to log into the Argo CD directly without any identity provider. So we'll use the Argo CD admin access. So just let me put this in the background. Okay, so I suspended it. Let me do it one more time. So when I do this, unfortunately, I suspended that terminal. So what I can do is I can just keep this terminal, and let me take a duplication of this terminal so that I don't have to mess with the Argo CD UI. Okay, I'll just take a new window. Perfect. Now I have a new window. I'll not touch the other one. So how do you get the Argo CD UI password, right? So the username is admin, but to get the Argo CD password, what you need to do is just say kubectl get secret minus n Argo CD. And when you do that, you will notice a secret here called Argo CD initial admin secret, right? So just go to this secret and edit the secret, kubectl edit secret minus n Argo CD. When you do this command, you will go to the Argo CD secret. And here you have this value, just copy this value, or you can also use the describe command. It depends on you if you want to use the edit or the describe. And now what I'll do is, because secrets are encrypted in a base 64 way, I have to decrypt this one. So echo whatever the secret that you have, followed by base 64 minus hyphen hyphen decode. So this is a command to get the secrets. And ignore this percentile character because I have not added a new space. I got this one. So rest of all is your password. Just copy the password and you will be able to log into Argo CD. So at the end of this, you have already logged into Argo CD, and now you know how to install Argo CD. You know how to create all the Argo CD applications, and you are also able to log into Argo CD. So this is taking a couple of seconds. That's fine. Let me see why is it taking time. Okay, so there was some problem with the port that I've used, but it doesn't matter. In your case, the port that you're using will not change because I've just restarted the terminal. The port has changed in my case, so you don't have to worry about it. So now you have logged into the Argo CD terminal. Now what you will do after this is the important question, right? So many people can do this installation. They are following the videos in the Jenkins ultimate Jenkins CI/CD pipeline. I've also showed how to use it, but to play around or to learn Argo CD, is there any best way? Yes, there is one repository here that is just go to your browser and just say GitHub Argo CD example apps. So this is a repository that is maintained by Argo CD itself. It's part of the Argo project, and you get a bunch of examples here. And you can use all of these examples, which are in different ways. For example, you can start with this application called Guestbook. So what is there inside Guestbook? It's a very simple deployment.yaml and a service.yaml. So what happens when you deploy this? Using Argo CD, you will notice that on your Kubernetes cluster. So this is a Git repository which has deployment and service, and you have deployed it onto your Kubernetes cluster. Similarly, let's say you are comfortable with this, then instead of deploying your application as a plain deployment YAML manifest or a service, let's say in your organization you are using Helm charts. Okay, so your application can be a plain Kubernetes deployment manifest, or it can also be a Helm chart, or it can also be in the form of a customize where you have base and overlays concept. So in such case also, this repository has bunch of examples. So here you have Helm guestbook, where this entire thing, the same application, is structured in Helm format. Okay, so let's say you want to learn Argo CD using your application manifest as Helm charts in a Git repository. So you can also try out these examples. Let's start with the plain guestbook example. Then I'll show you how to use the Helm as well. Of course, there is no change. You can just use the same GitHub repository, just change the path. But I can just show you. Firstly, what we will do is click on the create application button. And this is the application that we are talking about, right? So I told you what is an application sets generator. Application sets generator is used to generate multiple applications at once. So here I'm generating one single application for one Kubernetes cluster. Whereas let's say you have 100 Kubernetes clusters, and all that would differ is your cluster URL. So instead of creating this application 100 times, you can use the list generator in application sets, right? Using that, you can just modify your, it's just like a for loop, right? For basic understanding, you can assume that this generator uses for loop against the list that you have provided, and it generates the application 100 times. You just have to provide the configuration once. Okay, so for beginners, I think at this point of time, that is enough knowledge about application sets generator. So firstly, start here, provide the name of application. Just say my first application. probably you are using Argo CD for first time. Let's say my first time project. Don't worry about this. We are not going into the concept of app projects now. It is basically for role-based access control. Then the sync policy, let's put it as automatic, so that whenever you create this application, Argo CD automatically deploys that deployment onto the Kubernetes cluster. Then you have multiple fields here, the prune resources, self heal. This all will be covered in the next classes, because they are all the configurations or customizations that you can make to Argo CD. Automatic. And then what we will do is we will provide the URL of the repository. So what is the URL of the repository? Just copy this one here. This is the GitHub repository URL, and after that you have the path. What is the path? In your case, see, Argo CD is already reading your Git repository and providing the path, but this is not 100% accurate. In your case, the path is basically the guest book, right? So if you go to the GitHub repository itself, what you have done is you are choosing a path, like there are multiple applications. So what is the path for your application? Just the guest book folder. In your case, it can be multiple folders that you put. Just provide the accurate path. So here what I'll do is I'll put the example as guest book. Cluster URL, you can provide the same cluster on which you are in. So if you have another cluster, then you can provide the URL for your cluster. But by default, you can provide the one that's popping up. Then the namespace, where you would like to deploy this. Let's say you would like to deploy it on the default namespace. Okay, then do not touch any other things, because right now we are not doing any customizations. Just click on the create button. And now as soon as you click on the create button, you will notice that what Argo CD will do is pick that. Okay, so it started to pick up. Okay, so it will pick the applications from GitHub. Now what is the application that I'm talking about? The deployment.yaml and the service.yaml that's inside this folder. Argo CD will pick up these things and it will deploy onto the Kubernetes cluster that we have, right? So right now this Kubernetes cluster in the default namespace, if I just say kubectl get deploy, so see, this is getting created. Right now it's not totally available, but who is deploying this here? Argo CD is the one deploying here. Now you should ask me a question, like you might have a question that Abhishek, I can just do this using shell scripts as well. Why do I need Argo CD for it? So that's where Argo CD will come into picture, right? It works on the principles of Gitops, where it says it does a continuous reconciliation, right? What are the principles of Gitops? Like we discussed, it has to be versioned, it has to be continuously reconciled, then it has to be declarative in nature, and the other principles that we talked about. So one of the strong principles is that, let's say tomorrow someone comes here and update the version in your deployment.yaml. Argo CD automatically picks it up. You don't have to make any changes. See, Argo CD is doing the syncing for you, and Argo CD started deploying the deployment.yaml and the service.yaml on your cluster, and it shows the status of everything. Like what is the status of your pod, what is the deployment, how is the service. Right now the pod is still getting created, but that's out of you don't have to wait for it. There might be some time that is taking for the pod to come up, but end of the day our goal is to deploy a deployment and a service, which we have done. So what is the beauty of Argo CD? Like I told you, what you can do is you can just fork this repository. Where is this? Yeah, so just fork this repository, and you can play around with modifying these fields. Let's say you can modify the replica count to 2. Just submit that change to GitHub, and Argo CD will automatically pick this change up, and it will make that change onto your Kubernetes cluster. So there is a layer that Argo CD is avoiding, and it is doing a continuous reconciliation, right? So this is how you use Argo CD using the plain YAML manifest. Now, once this is done, you have deployed your first application in terms of deployment.yaml and service. You have deployed your deployment and service using Argo CD. The other thing that I wanted to show is Argo CD is not opinionated. What does being opinionated mean? What does not being opinionated mean? Like Argo CD leaves up to the users or the DevOps engineers to how to store their deployment services or any Kubernetes YAML manifests in the Git repository. Like you can do it as plain manifest, the one that we have done, the guest book example that I've showed you, or you can also put them as Helm charts. You can put them as case on it format. You can put them as customized, or you can use any custom plugins as well, right? So Argo CD is not opinionated. So it does not recommend you that, okay, put them in the Helm format only, or put them in the customized format only. What is Helm format? Basically, instead of using the deployment and service.yaml, how does Helm format look like? If you just go to Helm guestbook, then you have chart.yaml, value.yaml, and templates. Inside templates, you will obviously have your deployment and service, which is controlled using the values.yaml. Whenever you update the values.yaml, you update the fields inside that deployment and service, right? So Argo CD is not opinionated. Now let's try using the Helm as well to see if Argo CD is able to pick up the change using Helm, or even you can practice by using your own Helm chart for your organization. So before that, I'll just delete this application. So sometimes delete might take time, and because we are doing a beginner video today, beginner hands-on, let's not even deep dive and understand what is foreground, background, and non-cascading. I'll just proceed with a foreground delete, which is by default. Just say put the name of the application that you have created, my first time. Okay. It will take a while to get all of these things, I mean to clear all of these things. Perfect. Now all of these things are deleted, and if you go back to the Kubernetes cluster, you will again notice that these things are not there. Just say kubectl deploy again, and now you'll notice that the guest book is not available, which is an application that we have created using Argo CD. Now let's try the Helm example. Of course, there will not be much difference, but I would like to show that as well. So my Helm example. Project name, again, we are not touching the concept of app projects today, so I don't want to change anything there. Automatic. Repository URL name. This is the repository that we have. Then what is the path? This time the path will change. It's a Helm guestbook because we want to deploy the Kubernetes deployment and service using the Helm way. Let's use the same namespace, default. And this is very important. If you have any custom values.yaml, or if you have any values, like you can pass all of these things here as well. But I don't want to change any configuration. We are not doing any customizations. So I'll just click on the create button. And you will notice that again, Argo CD is picking up the changes using the folder path that you have provided, irrespective of your application or the folder that you have created is in the Helm format or plain manifest format, or even you can try out the customize. Like, after this video, you can just play around with this customized way. So why is this important? Now, why am I stressing on this? Because from organization to organization, this thing will change. And as a DevOps engineer, it's your responsibility to structure the manifest of your applications in the defined format. So if your organization is using Helm charts, then you have to design Helm chart for your deployments or services or whatever your Kubernetes YAML manifests are. If your organization is using customize, as a DevOps engineer, you have to design the customized folder structure for your Kubernetes YAML manifest. And then Argo CD will make it easy for you, where Argo CD does not need any additional configuration changes. See, the application health is synced, and you have the pod is also up and running, the deployment is created, and the service is created. So that's why we call Argo CD as not opinionated in terms of the Git folder structure. So this is how you can play around. You have bunch of examples, and this is the best repository. So you can just fork this repository or start this repository, and you can start playing around with it, so that you get a good idea of using Argo CD. Many of our people have tried the Jenkins Argo CD example, and they understood about Argo CD, but they did not play around with Argo CD because they don't have a lot of references. In that example, I have provided the Git structure, I have provided the Argo CD installation, so they were able to try with that example. But if you want to deep dive, if you want to play around with multiple examples, then this is the best place. Okay, so you can take this URL, or I'll also try to put the link in the description. So both the links, one link is about the Argo CD docs that I'll put, the Gitops playlist, and also the Argo CD example apps. So you can go through these things. So now finally, how to use Argo CD using the CLI way. Okay, now everything here is using the UI, and some of the people are not able to bring up the UI, probably because they are using any cloud provider with low configuration, or they are not able to do the tunneling, or they are not able to get the load balancer IP address. So that shouldn't block, right? You should not be blocked because you are not able to access the UI. So there is one other way of interacting with Argo CD. So instead of bringing up the UI, what you can do is, like, I've used the mini cube, I've done the tunneling, and I was able to get the UI up. But instead, if you just go back to the Argo CD docs, then Argo CD also has something called as the CLI, right? Go to the getting started section and click on the go to this thing called download Argo CD CLI. So if you're on Brew, do this, or if you are on any other CLI formats, or sorry, operating system formats, just use that commands that are available here. So you can also get the CLI from here. Let's say this is a GitHub page, and you can go to the releases folder, and you can download depending upon your archetype. Okay, so there are different architecture types that are available. In my case, I'm on Mac, so I'll just use the Brew target and say Brew install Argo CD. Okay, so just go back here. Where is the documentation? Perfect. So Brew install Argo CD is the command that I'll do. Brew install Argo CD. Now, once this is installed, so this is like a CLI. Similar to kubectl, which you use to interact with the Kubernetes, Argo CD is the CLI option to interact with the Argo CD. Now, how did I install this? Just go through the documentation. Okay, so now this might take a couple of minutes to install. Once this is installed, I'll show you the different command options on how to use it. So similar to any tool, right? You can use Jenkins using the CLI, or you can also use Jenkins using the UI. You can use GitHub using the UI. You can use GitHub using the CLI. Any tool that is available, which is a tool that is well matured, or a tool that is ready to use in the market, mostly they have the UI and the CLI solutions. So in this case as well, now you might see that the Argo CD command line is installed. Now let's say I don't know anything about the Argo CD commands. Let's say I'm a beginner with Argo CD. How do I proceed? Just go back, and in the browser, just say Argo CD command reference. Okay, so just click on that, and you will get this Argo CD command reference, where it will explain you in a very detailed way, like how to create a Argo CD user, how to create, for example, in our case, we want to create an Argo CD application. Again, what is the application I'm talking about? This entire thing that we have created through the UI, right? So this is the application that we have created. How did we create? We just clicked on the create button, and we have provided all of these details, right? So these details now I'll try to provide using the CLI. Now, how to do that? Just click on, you have an option here called Argo CD app. Click on that Argo CD app, and then you have options here. Like, what are you trying to do? I'm trying to create an app, Argo CD app create. Again, click on that button for Argo CD app create, and you have examples as well. Like, I'll just copy this example, the same one, right? I'll just copy this. Now, what I'm trying to do, Argo CD app create guest book. What is the path of the repository? What is the path? In the UI, we provided the path of the folder as guest book. What is the destination namespace? I'm providing default. And what is your target cluster? The Kubernetes cluster. So the same thing that we are providing through the UI, I'm just providing through the CLI. Now, let me just delete this one to just show you that you can also do it using the CLI. So if any of you are blocked using the UI, don't worry, because there is also CLI for the rescue. So just delete this. I'll wait for it to be deleted so that I can show you. You can also do this using the CLI. Perfect. Everything is deleted. Now I'll just click on Argo CD create guest book. This is the command that I've copied. You can also reframe this command depending upon the okay. I understood what happened. I'll just tell you. So Argo CD app create guest book. What is the repo? What is your GitHub repo address? What is the path of your folder? Destination namespace and the destination server. Now, why did it fail? Because when you try to log into the UI, what is the first thing that you have done? You have logged into the UI, right? So for the CLI as well, you have to do the similar thing. So just do Argo CD login. What is the URL? Perfect. Just provide the URL. Argo CD login. What did it say? Okay. It just says that, when I try to provide the address here, I just copied it from the Minikube tunneling, right? So instead I can just provide the IP address of the Kubernetes cluster. Why you need that? Because when you do the Argo CD login, Argo CD tries to understand, okay, which Kubernetes cluster are you targeting? Are you trying to use the same Kubernetes cluster on your local, or are you trying to do a different Kubernetes cluster? So that's why we will provide the Kubernetes cluster address as well. So the command to log in through the CLI, you can just say Argo CD login, followed by what was the name of the service that we had. Okay, firstly, let's give the URL. You can also copy it from here. Let's say you have not created, you can also use it from the Minikube svc command. So 127.0.0.1, why did I use it? Because I'm going to use the local cluster itself, right? The one that I've created. So I'll use that followed by the port. Now, how did I get this port? So in my case, I've already done the tunneling, right? So how did I do that? You can just say Minikube svc followed by the name of the service. I just showed you, right? Minikube service Argo CD server minus n Argo CD. That's what I've done, and I got the tunneling. And I have that in a different terminal. If you want to take a look at that, at the starting of the video, we have done that tunneling part, right? So let's go back there to just show. So this is the tunneling that we have done, right? And we also have the oh, sorry, this one. So this is the tunneling that we have done, and we also have this URL. So you can just take this URL as is, okay, and just do the Argo CD login command part. So Argo CD login, this one. If you have not done the tunneling, then what you will do is you will provide the cluster IP address or the node port IP address of the Argo CD server. But better you do this so that you have a clear way of understanding. So Argo CD login followed by the URL colon port. As soon as you do it, it will ask, do you want to proceed with insecure way? Because we are using the HTTP. Just say yes and do the admin. And what was the password? I don't remember the password because I haven't saved. What we can do is we can go back and we can execute that command, right? So I think we must have that handy. kubectl edit secret. So you will get the secret. Just copy the secret. Oh, I think we should have that base64 command as well. So it's very easy to get the password. Sorry. Yeah. So I'll just do this thing base64. Yep. So this is the password that we have. Let's redo the thing. Argo CD login. Again, say yes because you want to proceed in secure way. Just put the username and put the password. Now you have successfully logged into Argo CD. Now you can execute that command, right? So just execute that command for creating the application. Argo CD app create. So now you will notice that the application will be created through the CLI as well. So what did we understand from this? If you don't have the access to the UI as well, you can still do this, and you can, if I log into the UI and I can just show you that the application is now getting created. And how did I do this? I'm done using the CLI. Let's say you don't have the UI at all and you want to see it. What you can do is just say Argo CD get app. Okay. So you will see that the application that you have created, Argo CD, sorry, oh my bad, just say kubectl get application minus n Argo CD namespace or the namespace that you have created this application. So you will notice that the guestboot application is created using the CLI as well. I did not use the UI. And if you want to get the applications deployed, then because you have deployed in the default namespace, right? You pass the namespace as default. You can also just say kubectl get deploy -n default. Now it is getting created, so it will take some time. Let's click on the sync button. I think we did not enable automatic sync, that's why it is taking time. Now once it syncs, then you will notice that if in the UI we used an option called automatic sync. In the CLI we did not pass it, that's why I have provided the sync button. So you can also sync that automatically through the CLI. You can just go through the Argo CD reference documentation. Perfect. So this is how you use the CLI similar to the UI. And what is the way to learn the CLI? Just go through this documentation called Argo CD command references. Okay, so just click on Argo CD command reference and learn any command that you would like to. Argo CD commands documentation is also very clear. Just go to Argo CD app. What did we do? Then we went to create Argo CD app create, and here you have bunch of options here. So even the sync thing that I've done, you can do it here, right? So just say sync. Yeah, see, you have sync options where you can pass the same thing here to the same command, the Argo CD app create. You can say hyphen sync options, and you can provide what is the sync option. Do you want to sync manually, or do you want to sync automatically? Oh, sorry, not the sync options. I can put that command as well. That is for the sync options for pruning or the other thing. But if you want to sync automatic, this is the option. Sync policy. Like, do you want to sync? Set the sync policy. Do you want to set the sync policy to automated, or do you want to set the sync policy to manual? Okay, so this is how you play around with Argo CD using the Argo CD CLI. So if you don't have a UI, if you're blocked, don't worry. You can use this CLI option and get the things done. Now, finally, the last part that is left is to show you how to install Argo CD using Helm charts or the operator. So operator we try to cover very detailed in the Jenkins and GitHub way. The tutorial that I have, I'll also put that link in the description, where we did the end-to-end CI/CD pipeline. In that video, I've showed you how to install Argo CD using the operator. But if you want to install Argo CD using Helm charts, one thing that you can do is there is a repository, Argo CD Helm install. Just first search for this. So you will get the URL from here as well, where you can see how to install Argo CD using Helm. So what is the URL? github.com argo proj. I think it's argo-helm. Let's see if I'm right. Yeah. So this is the repository, and in this repository, you have a very clear documentation of how to install Argo CD using Helm charts, right? So Argo CD Helm charts. Argo Helm is a collection of community maintained charts. This chart can be added, like where you can install Argo CD by just adding this Helm repository. You can install Argo CD as well. So I can put this link in the description. So overall, this is how you use Argo CD for the installation configuration. In the next video, I'll show you the advanced configurations of how to do self pruning, how to do auto healing, and then how to ignore differences. We'll also talk about how to add a cluster into the Argo CD UI. So bunch of other things that are left, which are high level configurations related to Argo CD. Only if it is required, like you can put the link in the comments in the comment section, like if you are willing to see that advanced configuration, or if you feel this is enough, then I can proceed with a different set of videos regarding a different topic. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.